You need to hear this if you're curious about Islamic marriage. Stay tuned. Prophet Muhammad taught that marriage in Islam is built on love, respect, and partnership. Treat your spouse with kindness and understanding. A successful marriage is like a beautiful garden. It flourishes with care and patience. Embrace these values and watch your love grow stronger every day. Discover the beauty of an Islamic marriage today. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 1, narrated by Anas bin Malik. A group of 3 men came to the houses of the wives of the Prophet asking how the Prophet worshipped Allah, and when they were informed about that, they considered their worship insufficient and said, "Where are we from, the Prophet, as his past and future sins have been forgiven?" Then one of them said, "I will offer the prayer throughout the night forever." The other said, "I will fast throughout the year and will not break my fast." The third said, "I will keep away from the women and will not marry forever." Allah's apostle came to them and said, "Are you the same people who said so and so? By Allah, I am more submissive to Allah and more afraid of Him than you. Yet I fast and break my fast, I do sleep and I also marry women. So he who does not follow my tradition in religion is not from me, not one of my followers." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 2, narrated by Ursa. That he asked Aisha about the statement of Allah, "If you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with the orphan girls, then marry other women of your choice, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with them, then only one, or the captives, that your right hands possess. That will be nearer to prevent you from doing injustice." 4.3. Aisha said, "O my nephew," this verse has been revealed in connection with an orphan girl under the guardianship of her guardian who is attracted by her wealth and beauty, and intends to marry her with a mahr less than what other women of her standard deserve. So they, such guardians, have been forbidden to marry them unless they do justice to them and give them their full mahr, and they are ordered to marry other women instead of them. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 3, narrated by Alqamah. While I was with Abdullah, Uthman met him at Mina and said, "O Abu Abdurrahman, I have something to say to you." So both of them went aside and Uthman said, "O Abu Abdurrahman, shall we marry you to a virgin who will make you remember your past days?" When Abdullah felt that he was not in need of that, he beckoned me to join him, saying, "O Alqamah." Then I heard him saying in reply to Uthman, "As you have said that, I tell you that, the Prophet once said to us, 'O young people, whoever among you is able to marry, should marry, and whoever is not able to marry, is recommended to fast, as fasting diminishes his sexual power.'" Volume 7, Book 62, Number 4, narrated by Abdullah. We were with the Prophet while we were young and had no wealth whatever. So Allah's apostle said, "O young people, whoever among you can marry, should marry, because it helps him lower his gaze and guard his modesty, i.e. his private parts from committing illegal sexual intercourse, etc., and whoever is not able to marry, should fast, as fasting diminishes his sexual power." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 5, narrated by Atta. We presented ourselves along with Ibn Abbas at the funeral procession of Maimuna at a place called Sarif. Ibn Abbas said, "This is the wife of the Prophet, so when you lift her bier, do not jerk it or shake it much, but walk smoothly, because the Prophet had 9 wives and he used to observe the night turns with 8 of them, and for one of them there was no night turn." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 6, narrated by Anas the Prophet. I used to go round, have sexual relations with all his wives in one night, and he had 9 wives. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 7, narrated by Sa'id bin Jubair. Ibn Abbas asked me, "Are you married?" I replied, "No." He said, "Marry, for the best person of this Muslim nation, that is Muhammad, of all other Muslims, had the largest number of wives." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 8, narrated by Umar bin al-Khattab. The Prophet said, "The rewards of deeds are according to the intention, and everybody will get the reward for what he has intended. So whoever emigrated for Allah's and his apostle's sake, his emigration was for Allah and his apostle, and whoever emigrated for worldly benefits or to marry a woman, then his emigration was for the thing for what he emigrated for." 1. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 9, narrated by Ibn Masud. We used to fight in the holy battles in the company of the Prophet, and we had no wives with us, so we said, "O Allah's apostle, shall we get castrated?" The Prophet forbade us to do so. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 10, narrated by Anas bin Malik. Abdurrahman bin Auf came from Mecca to Medina, and the Prophet made a bond of brotherhood between him and Sa'd bin Arabi al-Ansari. Al-Ansari had 2 wives, so he suggested that Abdur-Rahman take half his wives and property. Abdur-Rahman replied, "May Allah bless you with your wives and property, kindly show me the market." So, Abdur-Rahman went to the market and gained, in bargains, some dried yogurt and some butter. After a few days the Prophet saw Abdur-Rahman with some yellow stains on his clothes and asked him, "What is that, O Abdur-Rahman?" He replied, "I had married an Ansari woman." The Prophet asked, "How much mar did you give her?" He replied, "The weight of 1 date, stone of gold." The Prophet said, "Offer a banquet even with 1 sheep." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 11, narrated by Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. Allah's apostle forbade Uthman bin Mazun to abstain from marrying and other pleasures, and if he had allowed him, we would have gotten ourselves castrated. 1. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 12, narrated by Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. The Prophet prevented Uthman bin Mazun from that, not marrying, and had he allowed him, we would have got ourselves castrated. 1. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 13, narrated by Abdullah. We used to participate in the holy battles led by Allah's apostle, and we had nothing, no wives, with us. So we said, "Shall we get ourselves castrated?" He forbade us that and then allowed us to marry women with a temporary contract, too, and recited to us, "O you who believe, make not unlawful the good things which Allah has made lawful for you, but commit no transgression." 5.87. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 13, narrated by Abu Hurairah. I said, "O Allah's apostle, I am a young man and I am afraid that I may commit illegal sexual intercourse and I cannot afford to marry." He kept silent and then repeated my question once again, but he kept silent. I said the same, for the 3rd time, and he remained silent. Then repeated my question, for the 4th time, and only then the Prophet said, "O Abu Hurairah, the pen has dried after writing what you are going to confront. So, it does not matter whether you get yourself castrated or not." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 14, narrated by Aisha. I said, "O Allah's apostle, suppose you landed in a valley where there is a tree of which something has been eaten, and then you found trees of which nothing has been eaten. Of which tree would you let your camel graze?" He said, "I will let my camel graze, of the one of which nothing has been eaten before." The sub-narrator added, Aisha meant that Allah's apostle had not married a virgin besides herself. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 15, narrated by Aisha. Allah's apostle said to me, "You have been shown to me twice in my dreams. A man was carrying you in a silken cloth and said to me, 'This is your wife.' I uncovered it, and behold, it was you. I said to myself, 'If this dream is from Allah, He will cause it to come true.'" Volume 7, Book 62, Number 16, narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah. While we were returning from a Ghazwa, holy battle with the Prophet, I started driving my camel fast as it was a lazy camel. A rider came behind me and pricked my camel with a spear he had with him, and then my camel started running as fast as the best camel you may see. Behold, the rider was the Prophet himself. He said, "What makes you in such a hurry?" I replied, "I am newly married." He said, "Did you marry a virgin or a matron?" I replied, "A matron." He said, "Why didn't you marry a young girl so that you may play with her, and she with you?" When we were about to enter Medina, the Prophet said, "Wait so that you may enter Medina at night, so that the lady of unkempt hair may comb her hair, and the one whose husband has been absent may shave her pubic region." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 17, narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah. When I got married, Allah's apostle said to me, "What type of lady have you married?" I replied, "I have married a matron." He said, "Why, don't you have a liking for the virgins and for fondling them?" Jabir also said, Allah's apostle said, "Why didn't you marry a young girl so that you might play with her and she with you?" Volume 7, Book 62, Number 18, narrated by Ursa. The Prophet asked Abu Bakr for Aisha's hand in marriage. Abu Bakr said, "But I am your brother." The Prophet said, "You are my brother in Allah's religion and His book, but she, Aisha, is lawful for me to marry." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 19, narrated by Abu Hurairah. The Prophet said, "The best women are the riders of the camels and the righteous among the women of Quraysh. They are the kindest women to their children in their childhood and the more careful women of the property of their husbands." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 20, narrated by Abu Burda's father. Allah's apostle said, "Any man who has a slave girl whom he educates properly, teaches good manners, manumits and marries her, will get a double reward. And if any man of the people of the scriptures believes in his own prophet and then believes in me too, he will also get a double reward." And any slave who fulfills his duty to his master and to his lord will also get a double reward. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 21, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, Abraham did not tell lies except 3, one of them was, when Abraham passed by a tyrant and his wife, Sarah, was accompanying him. Abu Huraira then mentioned the whole narration and said, the tyrant gave her Hajar. Sarah said, Allah saved me from the hands of the kafir, that is infidel, and gave me Hajar to serve me. Abu Huraira added, that Hajar is your mother, O Banu Ma'asama, that is the Arabs. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 22, narrated by Anas. The Prophet stayed for 3 days between Khaybar and Medina, and there he consummated his marriage to Safiya bint Huyai. I invited the Muslims to the wedding banquet in which neither meat nor bread was offered. He ordered for leather dining sheets to be spread, and dates, dried yogurt and butter were laid on it, and that was the Prophet's wedding banquet. The Muslims wondered, is she, Safiya, considered as his wife, or his slave girl? Then they said, if he orders her to veil herself, she will be one of the mothers of the believers. But if he does not order her to veil herself, she will be a slave girl. So when the Prophet proceeded from there, he spared her a space behind him, on his she-camel, and put a screening veil between her and the people. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 23, narrated by Anas bin Malik, Allah's apostle, manumitted Safiya and regarded her manumission as her mar. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 24, narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd as-Sa'idi. A woman came to Allah's apostle and said, O Allah's apostle, I have come to give you myself in marriage, without mar. Allah's apostle looked at her. He looked at her carefully and fixed his glance on her and then lowered his head. When the lady saw that he did not say anything, she sat down. A man from his companions got up and said, O Allah's apostle, if you are not in need of her, then marry her to me. The Prophet said, have you got anything to offer? The man said, no, by Allah, O Allah's apostle. The Prophet said to him, go to your family and see if you have something. The man went and returned saying, no, by Allah, I have not found anything. Allah's apostle said, go again and look for something, even if it is an iron ring. He went again and returned, saying, no, by Allah, O Allah's apostle, I could not find even an iron ring, but this is my izar, waist sheet. He had no rida. He added, I give half of it to her. Allah's apostle said, what will she do with your izar? If you wear it, she will be naked, and if she wears it, you will be naked. So that man sat down for a long while and then got up, to depart. When Allah's apostle saw him going, he ordered that he be called back. When he came, the Prophet said, how much of the Quran do you know? He said, I know such surah and such surah, counting them. The Prophet said, do you know them by heart? He replied, yes. The Prophet said, go, I marry her to you for that much of the Quran which you have. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 26, narrated by Aisha Abu Hudhaifa bin Utbah bin Rabia bin Abdi Shams, who had witnessed the Battle of Badr along with the Prophet, adopted Salim as his son, to whom he married his niece, Hind bint al-Walid bin Utbah bin Rabia, and Salim was the freed slave of an Ansar woman, just as the Prophet had adopted Zayd as his son. It was the custom in the pre-Islamic period that if somebody adopted a boy, the people would call him the son of the adoptive father, and he would be the latter's heir. But when Allah revealed the divine verses, call them by the names of their fathers, your freed slaves, 33.5, the adopted persons were called by their fathers' names. The one whose father was not known would be regarded as a Mawla and your brother in religion. Later on, Salah bint Suhail bin Amr al-Qurayshi al-Amiri, and she was the wife of Abu Hudhaifa bin Utbah, came to the Prophet and said, O Allah's apostle, we used to consider Salim as our adopted son, and now Allah has revealed what you know regarding adopted sons. The sub-narrator then mentioned the rest of the narration, Volume 7, Book 62, Number 26, narrated by Aisha. Allah's apostle entered upon Dubab bint Az-Zubair and said to her, do you have a desire to perform the Hajj? She replied, by Allah, I feel sick. He said to her, intend to perform Hajj and stipulate something by saying, O Allah, I will finish my ihram at any place where you stop me, that is, I am unable to go further. She was the wife of al-Miqdad bin al-Aswad. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 27, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, a woman is married for 4 things, that is, her wealth, her family status, her beauty, and her religion. So you should marry the religious woman, otherwise you will be a losers. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 28, narrated by Saul. A man passed by Allah's apostle, and Allah's apostle asked his companions, "What do you say about this man?" They replied, "If he asks for a lady's hand, he ought to be given her in marriage, and if he intercedes for someone, his intercessor should be accepted, and if he speaks, he should be listened to." Allah's apostle kept silent, and then a man from among the poor Muslims passed by, and Allah's apostle asked them, "What do you say about this man?" They replied, "If he asks for a lady's hand in marriage, he does not deserve to be married, and he intercedes for someone, his intercession should not be accepted, and if he speaks, he should not be listened to." Allah's apostle said, "This poor man is better than so many of the first as filling the earth." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 29, narrated by Ursa that he asked Aisha regarding the verse, "If you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with the orphans." 4.3. She said, "O my nephew, this verse refers to the orphan girl who is under the guardianship of her guardian who likes her beauty and wealth and wishes to marry her and curtails her mahr. Such guardians have been forbidden to marry them unless they do justice by giving them their full mahr, and they have been ordered to marry other than them." The people asked for the verdict of Allah's apostle after that, so Allah revealed, "They ask your instruction concerning the women, whom you desire to marry." 4.127. So Allah revealed to them that if the orphan girl had beauty and wealth, they desired to marry her and for her family status. They can only marry them if they give them their full mahr. And if they had no desire to marry them, because of their lack of wealth and beauty, they would leave them and marry other women. So, as they used to leave them, when they had no interest in them, they were forbidden to marry them when they had such interest, unless they treated them justly and gave them their full mahr. Apostle said, "If at all there is evil omen, it is in the horse, the woman, and the house. A lady is to be warded off, and the statement of Allah, 'Truly, among your wives and your children there are enemies for you,' i.e., he may stop you from the obedience of Allah." 64.14, Volume 7, Book 62, Number 30, narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. Allah's apostle said, "Evil omen is in the women, the house, and the horse." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 31, narrated by Ibn Umar. Evil omen was mentioned before the Prophet. The Prophet said, "If there is evil omen in anything, it is in the house, the woman, and the horse." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 32, narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd. Allah's apostle said, "If at all there is bad omen, it is in the horse, the woman, and the house." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 33, narrated by Usama bin Zaid. The Prophet said, "After me I have not left any affliction more harmful to men than women." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 34, narrated by Aisha 3. Principles were established because of Barira. When Banra was manumitted, she was given the option to remain with her slave husband or not. 2. Allah's apostle said, "The wala of the slave is for the one who manumits the slave." 3. When Allah's apostle entered the house, he saw a cooking pot on the fire, but he was given bread and meat soup from the soup of the home. The Prophet said, "Didn't I see the cooking pot on the fire?" It was said, "That is the meat given in charity to Barira, and you do not eat the things given in charity." The Prophet said, "It is an object of charity for Barira, and it is a present for us." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 35, narrated by Aisha, regarding the verse, "And if you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with the orphans." 4.3. It is about the orphan girl who is in the custody of a man who is her guardian, and he intends to marry her because of her wealth, but he treats her badly, and does not manage her property fairly and honestly. Such a man should marry women of his liking other than her, 2 or 3 or 4. Prohibited to you for marriage are your foster mothers who suckled you. 4.23. Marriage is prohibited between persons having a foster-suckling relationship corresponding to a blood relationship which renders marriage unlawful. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 36, narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, that while Allah's apostle was with her, she heard a voice of a man asking permission to enter the house of Hafsa. Aisha added, "I said, 'O Allah's apostle, this man is asking permission to enter your house.' The Prophet said, 'I think he is so-and-so,' naming the foster uncle of Hafsa. Aisha said, 'If so-and-so,' naming her foster uncle, "were living, could he enter upon me?" The Prophet said, "Yes, for foster-suckling relations make all those things unlawful, which are unlawful through corresponding birth, blood relations. Volume 7, Book 62, number 37. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. It was said to the Prophet, "Won't you marry the daughter of Hamza?" He said, "She is my foster niece, brother's daughter." Volume 7, Book 62, number 38, narrated by Habiba, daughter of Abu Sufyan. I said, "O Allah's apostle, marry my sister, the daughter of Abu Sufyan." The Prophet said, "Do you like that?" I replied, "Yes, for even now I am not your only wife, and I like that my sister should share the good with me." The Prophet said, "But that is not lawful for me." I said, "We have heard that you want to marry the daughter of Abu Salama." He said, "You mean the daughter of Salama?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Even if she were not my stepdaughter, she would be unlawful for me to marry as she is my foster niece. I and Abu Salama were suckled by Thuwaiba, so you should not present to me your daughters or your sisters in marriage." Narrated Ursa. Thuwaiba was the freed slave girl of Abu Lab whom he had manumitted, and then she suckled the Prophet. When Abu Lab died, one of his relatives saw him in a dream in a very bad state and asked him, "What have you encountered?" Abu Lab said, "I have not found any rest since I left you, except that I have been given water to drink in this," the space between his thumb and other fingers, "and that is because of my manumitting Thuwaiba." Volume 7, Book 62, number 39, narrated by Aisha. That the Prophet entered upon her while a man was sitting with her. Signs of anger seemed to appear on his face as if he disliked that. She said, "Here is my foster brother." He said, "Be sure as to who is your foster brother, for foster-suckling relationship is established only when milk is the only food of the child." Volume 7, Book 62, number 41, narrated by Uqba bin al-Harith. I married a woman, and then a black lady came to us and said, "I have suckled you both, you and your wife." So I came to the Prophet and said, "I married so-and-so, and then a black lady came to us and said to me, 'I have suckled both of you, but I think she is a liar.'" The Prophet turned his face away from me and I moved to face his face and said, "She is a liar." The Prophet said, "How can you keep her as your wife, when that lady has said that she has suckled both of you, so abandon, that is divorce, her, your wife." Volume 7, Book 62, number 42, narrated by Habiba. I said, "O Allah's apostle, do you like to have my sister the daughter of Abu Sufyan?" The Prophet said, "What shall I do with her?" I said, "Marry her." He said, "Do you like that?" I said, "Yes, for even now I am not your only wife, so I like that my sister should share you with me." He said, "She is not lawful for me to marry." I said, "We have heard that you want to marry." He said, "The daughter of Salama?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Even if she were not my stepdaughter, she should be unlawful for me to marry, for Thuwaiba suckled me and her father, Abu Salama. So you should neither present your daughters nor your sisters to me." Volume 7, Book 62, number 43, narrated by Habiba. I said, "O Allah's apostle, marry my sister, the daughter of Abu Sufyan." He said, "Do you like that?" I said, "Yes, for even now I am not your only wife, and the most beloved person to share the good with me is my sister." The Prophet said, "But that is not lawful for me, that is, to be married to two sisters at a time." I said, "O Allah's apostle, by Allah we have heard that you want to marry Dura, the daughter of Abu Salama." He said, "You mean the daughter of Salama?" I said, "Yes." He said, "By Allah, even if she were not my stepdaughter, she would not be lawful for me to marry, for she is my foster niece, for Thuwaiba has suckled me and Abu Salama, so you should neither present your daughters nor your sisters to me." Volume 7, Book 62, number 44, narrated by Jabir. Allah's apostle forbade that a woman should be married to man, along with her paternal or maternal aunt. Volume 7, Book 62, number 45, narrated by Abu Huraira. Allah's apostle said, "A woman and her paternal aunt should not be married to the same man, and similarly, a woman and her maternal aunt should not be married to the same man." Volume 7, Book 62, number 46, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet forbade that a woman should be married to a man along with her paternal aunt, or with her maternal aunt, at the same time. Az-Zuri, the sub-narrator, said, "There is a similar order for the paternal aunt of the father of one's wife, for Ursa told me that Aisha said, 'What is unlawful because of blood relations is also unlawful because of the corresponding foster-suckling relations.'" Volume 7, Book 62, number 47, narrated by Ibn Umar. Allah's apostle forbade ash-shigar, which means that somebody marries his daughter to somebody else, and the latter marries his daughter to the former without paying mahr. Volume 7, Book 62, number 48, narrated by Hisham's father, Khawla bint. Hakim was one of those ladies who presented themselves to the Prophet for marriage. Aisha said, "Doesn't a lady feel ashamed for presenting herself to a man?" But when the verse, "O Muhammad, you may postpone the turn of any of them, your wives that you please," 33.51 was revealed, Aisha said, "O Allah's Apostle, I do not see, but that your Lord hurries in pleasing you." Volume 7, Book 62, number 49, narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet got married while he was in the state of Iram. Volume 7, Book 62, number 50, narrated by Ali. I said to Ibn Abbas, during the Battle of Khaybar the Prophet forbade nikah, al-muta, and the eating of donkey's meat. Volume 7, Book 62, number 51, narrated by Abu Jamra. I heard Ibn Abbas giving a verdict when he was asked about the muta with the women, and he permitted it, nikah al-muta. On that a freed slave of his said to him, "That is only when it is very badly needed and women are scarce." On that, Ibn Abbas said, "Yes." Volume 7, Book 62, number 52, narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah and Salama bin al-Aqwa. While we were in an army, Allah's Apostle came to us and said, "You have been allowed to do the muta, marriage, so do it." Salama bin al-Aqwa said, Allah's Apostle said, "If a man and a woman agree to marry temporarily, their marriage should last for 3 nights, and if they like to continue, they can do so, and if they want to separate, they can do so." I do not know whether that was only for us or for all the people in general. Abu Abdullah al-Bukhari said, Ali made it clear that the Prophet said, "The muta marriage has been cancelled, made unlawful." Volume 7, Book 62, number 53, narrated by Thabit al-Banani. I was with Anas while his daughter was present with him. Anas said, "A woman came to Allah's Apostle and presented herself to him, saying, 'O Allah's Apostle, have you any need for me? That is, would you like to marry me?' Thereupon Anas's daughter said, "What a shameless lady she was! Shame, shame!" Anas said, "She was better than you, she had a liking for the Prophet, so she presented herself for marriage to him." Volume 7, Book 62, number 54, narrated by Sal bin Sa'd. A woman presented herself to the Prophet for marriage. A man said to him, "O Allah's Apostle, if you are not in need of her, marry her to me." The Prophet said, "What have you got?" The man said, "I have nothing." The Prophet said to him, "Go and search for something, even if it were an iron ring." The man went and returned saying, "No, I have not found anything, not even an iron ring, but this is my izar waist sheet and half of it is for her." He had no rida, upper garment. The Prophet said, "What will she do with your waist sheet? If you wear it she will have nothing over her, and if she wears it, you will have nothing over you." So the man sat down, and when he had sat a long time, he got up, to leave. When the Prophet saw him, leaving, he called him back, or the man was called for him, and he said to the man, "How much of the Quran do you know, by heart?" The man replied, "I know such surah and such surah by heart," naming the surahs. The Prophet said, "I have married her to you for what you know of the Quran." Volume 7, Book 62, number 55. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, Umar bin al-Khattab said, when Hafsa bint Umar became a widow after the death of her husband, Kunais bin Hudafa as-Sami, who had been one of the companions of the Prophet, and he died at Medina. I went to Uthman bin Affan and presented Hafsa for marriage to him. He said, "I will think it over." I waited for a few days, then he met me and said, "It seems that it is not possible for me to marry at present." Umar further said, I met Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and said to him, "If you wish, I will marry my daughter Hafsa to you." Abu Bakr kept quiet and did not say anything to me in reply. I became more angry with him than with Uthman. I waited for a few days and then Allah's Apostle asked for her hand, and I gave her in marriage to him. Afterwards I met Abu Bakr who said, "Perhaps you became angry with me when you presented Hafsa to me, and I did not give you a reply." I said yes. Abu Bakr said, "Nothing stopped me to respond to your offer except that I knew that Allah's Apostle had mentioned her, and I never wanted to let out the secret of Allah's Apostle, and if Allah's Apostle had refused her, I would have accepted her." Volume 7, Book 62, number 56, narrated by Zainab bint Salama Habiba, said to Allah's Apostle, "We have heard that you want to marry Dura bint Abu Salama." Allah's Apostle said, "Can she be married along with Salama, her mother? Even if I have not married Salama, she would not be lawful for me to marry, for her father is my foster brother. And there is no blame on you if you make hint of betrothal or conceal it in your hearts. Allah is oft forgiving, most forbearing." 2.235. Ibn Abbas said, hint your intention of marrying is made by saying to the widow, for example, "I want to marry," and I wish that Allah will make a righteous lady available for me." Al-Qasim said, "One may say to the widow, 'I hold all respect for you, and I am interested in you. Allah will bring you much good,' or something similar." Atta said, "One should hint his intention and should not declare it openly. One may say, 'I have some need, have good tidings, praise be to Allah, you are fit to remarry.' She, the widow, may say in reply, 'I am listening to what you say,' but she should not make a promise. Her guardian should not make a promise to somebody to get her married to him without her knowledge. But if, while still in the iddat period, she makes a promise to marry somebody, and he ultimately marries her, they are not to be separated by divorce, that is, the marriage is valid." Volume 7, Book 62, number 57, narrated by Aisha, Allah's apostle, said to me, "You were shown to me in a dream. An angel brought you to me, wrapped in a piece of silken cloth, and said to me, 'This is your wife.' I removed the piece of cloth from your face, and there you were. I said to myself, 'If it is from Allah, then it will surely be.'" Volume 7, Book 62, number 58, narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd. A woman came to Allah's apostle and said, "O Allah's apostle, I have come to you to present myself to you for marriage." Allah's apostle glanced at her. He looked at her carefully and fixed his glance on her and then lowered his head. When the lady saw that he did not say anything, she sat down. A man from his companions got up and said, "O Allah's apostle, if you are not in need of her, then marry her to me." The Prophet said, "Have you got anything to offer?" The man said, "No, by Allah, O Allah's apostle." The Prophet said to him, "Go to your family and try to find something." So the man went and returned, saying, "No, by Allah, O Allah's apostle, I have not found anything." The Prophet said, "Go again and look for something, even if it were an iron ring." He went and returned, saying, "No, by Allah, O Allah's apostle, I could not find even an iron ring, but this is my izar, waist sheet." He had no rida, upper garment. He added, "I give half of it to her." Allah's apostle said, "What will she do with your izar? If you wear it, she will have nothing over herself thereof, will be naked. And if she wears it, then you will have nothing over yourself thereof." So the man sat for a long period and then got up to leave. When Allah's apostle saw him leaving, he ordered that he be called back. When he came, the Prophet asked him, "How much of the Quran do you know, by heart?" The man replied, "I know such surah and such surah and such surah," naming the surahs. The Prophet said, "Can you recite it by heart?" He said, "Yes." The Prophet said, "Go, I let you marry her for what you know of the Quran, as her mar." Volume 7, Book 62, number 59, narrated by Aisha, as regards the verse. "And about what is recited unto you in the book, concerning orphan girls to whom you give not the prescribed portions, and yet, whom you desire to marry." 4.127. This verse is about the female orphan who is under the guardianship of a man with whom she shares her property, and he has more right over her than anybody else, but does not like to marry her, so he prevents her from marrying somebody else, lest he should share the property with him. Volume 7, Book 62, number 60, narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. When Hafsa, Umar's daughter, became a widow because of the death of her husband, Ibn Hudafa as-Sami, who was one of the companion of the Prophet and the one of the Badr warriors and died at Medina, Umar said, "I met Uthman bin Affan and gave him an offer, saying, 'If you wish, I will marry Hafsa to you.' He said, 'I will think it over.' I waited for a few days, then he met me and said, 'I have made up my mind not to marry at present.' Umar added, 'Then I met Abu Bakr and said to him, 'If you wish, I will marry Hafsa to you.'" Volume 7, Book 62, number 61, narrated by Al-Hassan, concerning the verse, "Do not prevent them." 2.232. Makil bin Yasar told me that it was revealed in his connection. He said, "I married my sister to a man and he divorced her. And when her days of iddah, 3 menstrual periods, were over, the man came again and asked for her hand. But I said to him, 'I married her to you and made her your bed, your wife, and favored you with her, but you divorced her. Now you come to ask for her hand again? No, by Allah, she will never go back to you, again.' That man was not a bad man, and his wife wanted to go back to him, so Allah revealed this verse, 'Do not prevent them.' 2.232. So I said, 'Now I will do it, let her go back to him, O Allah's apostle.' So he married her to him again. Volume 7, Book 62, number 62, narrated by Aisha, regarding his statement. "They ask your instruction concerning the women. Say, Allah instructs you about them." 4.127. It is about the female orphan who is under the guardianship of a man with whom she shares her property, and he does not want to marry her and dislikes that someone else should marry her, lest he should share the property with him, so he prevents her from marrying. So Allah forbade such a guardian to do so, that is to prevent her from marrying. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 63, narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd. While we were sitting in the company of the Prophet, a woman came to him and presented herself, for marriage, to him. The Prophet looked at her, lowering his eyes and raising them, but did not give a reply. One of his companions said, "Marry her to me, O Allah's apostle." The Prophet asked him, "Have you got anything?" He said, "I have got nothing." The Prophet said, "Not even an iron ring." He said, "Not even an iron ring, but I will tear my garment into 2 halves and give her 1 half and keep the other half." The Prophet said, "No, do you know some of the Quran by heart?" He said, "Yes." The Prophet said, "Go, I have agreed to marry her to you with what you know of the Quran, as her mahr." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 64, narrated by Aisha, that the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old, and then she remained with him for 9 years, that is, till his death. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 65, narrated by Aisha, that the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. Hisham said, "I have been informed that Aisha remained with the Prophet for 9 years, that is till his death." What you know of the Quran, by heart. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 66, narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd. A woman came to Allah's apostle and said, "I present myself to you, for marriage." She stayed for a long while, then a man said, "If you are not in need of her, then marry her to me." The Prophet said, "Have you got anything in order to pay her mahr?" He said, "I have nothing with me except my izar, waist sheet." The Prophet said, "If you give her your izar, you will have no izar to wear, so go, and search for something." He said, "I could not find anything." The Prophet said, "Try to find something, even if it were an iron ring," but he was not able to find even that. The Prophet said to him, "Do you memorize something of the Quran?" "Yes." He said, "Such surah and such surah," naming those surahs. The Prophet said, "We have married her to you for what you know of the Quran by heart." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 67, narrated by Abu Hurairah. The Prophet said, "A matron should not be given in marriage except after consulting her, and a virgin should not be given in marriage except after her permission." The people asked, "O Allah's apostle, how can we know her permission?" He said, "Her silence indicates her permission." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 68, narrated by Aisha. I said, "O Allah's apostle, a virgin feels shy." He said, "Her consent is expressed by her silence." Volume 7, Book 62, Number 69, narrated by Kanza bint Qidam al-Ansariya, that her father gave her in marriage when she was a matron, and she disliked that marriage. So she went to Allah's apostle and he declared that marriage invalid. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 70, narrated by Abdurrahman bin Yazid and Majami bin Yazid. The same hadith above, a man called Qidam married a daughter of his to somebody against her consent. If you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with the orphan girls, then marry other women of your choice. 4.3. And if somebody says to the guardian of a woman, "Marry me to so-and-so," and the guardian remained silent or said to him, "What have you got?" and the other said, "I have so much and so much mahr," or kept quiet, and then the guardian said, "I have married her to you," then the marriage is valid, legal. This narration was told by Sahl on the authority of the Prophet. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 71, narrated by Ursa bin Az-Zubair. That he asked Aisha, saying to her, "O mother, in what connection was this verse revealed? If you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with orphan girls, to the end of the verse, that your right hands possess." 4.3. Aisha said, "O my nephew, it was about the female orphan under the protection of her guardian who was interested in her beauty and wealth and wanted to marry her with a little or reduced mahr. So such guardians were forbidden to marry female orphans unless they deal with them justly and give their full mahr, and they were ordered to marry women other than them." Aisha added, later, the people asked Allah's apostle for instructions, and then Allah revealed, "They ask your instruction concerning the women, and yet whom you desire to marry." 4.127. So Allah revealed to them in this verse that, if a female orphan had wealth and beauty, they desired to marry her and were interested in her noble descent and the reduction of her mahr. But if she was not desired by them because of her lack in fortune and beauty, they left her and married some other woman. So, as they used to leave her when they had no interest in her, they had no right to marry her if they had the desire to do so, unless they deal justly with her and gave her a full amount of mahr. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 72, narrated by Saul. A woman came to the prophet and presented herself to him, for marriage. He said, I am not in need of women these days. Then a man said, O Allah's apostle, marry her to me. The prophet asked him, What have you got? He said, I have got nothing. The prophet said, Give her something, even an iron ring. He said, I have got nothing. The prophet asked him, How much of the Quran do you know, by heart? He said, So much and so much. The prophet said, I have married her to you for what you know of the Quran. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 73, narrated by Ibn Umar. The prophet decreed that one should not try to cancel a bargain already agreed upon between some other persons, by offering a bigger price. And a man should not ask for the hand of a girl who is already engaged to his Muslim brother, unless the first suitor gives her up, or allows him to ask for her hand. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 74, narrated by Abu Hurairah. The prophet said, Beware of suspicion, about others, as suspicion is the falsest talk, and do not spy upon each other, and do not listen to the evil talk of the people about others' affairs, and do not have enmity with one another, but be brothers. And none should ask for the hand of a girl who is already engaged to his Muslim brother, but one should wait till the first suitor marries her or leaves her. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 75, narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. When Hafsa became a widow, Umar said, I met Abu Bakr and said to him, If you wish, I will marry Hafsa bint Umar to you. I waited for a few days, then Allah's apostle asked for her hand. Later Abu Bakr met me and said, Nothing stopped me from returning to you concerning your offer, except that I knew that Allah's apostle had mentioned his wish to marry her, and I could never let out the secret of Allah's apostle. If he had left her, I would have accepted her. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 76, narrated by Ibn Umar. Two men came from the east and delivered speeches, and the prophet said, Some eloquent speech has the influency of magic. For example, some people refuse to do something, and then a good eloquent speaker addresses them, and then they agree to do that very thing after his speech. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 77, narrated by Arabi, the daughter of Muawid bin Afra. After the consummation of my marriage, the prophet came and sat on my bed as far from me as you are sitting now, and our little girls started beating the tambourines and reciting elegiac verses mourning my father, who had been killed in the battle of Badr. One of them said, Among us is a prophet who knows what will happen tomorrow. On that the prophet said, Leave this saying, and keep on saying the verses which you had been saying before. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 78, narrated by Anas Abdurrahman bin Auf married a woman and gave her gold equal to the weight of a date stone, as mar. When the prophet noticed the signs of cheerfulness of the marriage on his face and asked him about it, he said, I have married a woman and gave her gold equal to a date stone in weight, as mar. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 79, narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd as-Sa'idi. While I was sitting among the people in the company of Allah's apostle, a woman stood up and said, O Allah's apostle, she has given herself in marriage to you, please give your opinion of her. The prophet did not give her any reply. She again stood up and said, O Allah's apostle, she has given herself in marriage to you, so please give your opinion of her. The prophet did not give her any reply. She again stood up for the third time and said, She has given herself in marriage to you, so give your opinion of her. So a man stood up and said, O Allah's apostle, marry her to me. The prophet asked him, Have you got anything? He said, No. The prophet said, Go and search for something, even if it were an iron ring. The man went and searched and then returned saying, I could not find anything, not even an iron ring. Then the prophet said, Do you know something of the Quran, by heart? He replied, I know by heart such surah and such surah. The prophet said, Go, I have married her to you for what you know of the Quran, by heart. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 80, narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd. The prophet said to a man, Marry even with a mar equal to an iron ring. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 81, narrated by Uqba. The prophet said, The stipulations most entitled to be abided by are those with which you are given the right to enjoy the women's private parts, that is the stipulations of the marriage contract. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 82, narrated by Abu Hurairah. The prophet said, It is not lawful for a woman at the time of wedding to ask for the divorce of her sister, that is the other wife of her would-be husband, in order to have everything for herself, for she will take only what has been written for her. Volume 7, Book 62, Number 83, narrated by Anas bin Malik. Abdurrahman bin Auf came to Allah's apostle and he had marks of sufra, yellow perfume. Allah's apostle asked him about those marks. Abdurrahman bin Auf told him that he had married a woman from the Ansar. The Prophet asked, "How much mahr did you pay her?" He said, "I paid gold equal to the weight of a date stone." Allah's apostle said to him, "Give a wedding banquet, even if with one sheep." Volume 7, Book 62, number 84, narrated by Anas. The Prophet offered a wedding banquet on the occasion of his marriage to Zainab, and provided a good meal for the Muslims. Then he went out as was his custom on marrying. He came to the dwelling places of the mothers of the believers, that is his wives, invoking good on them, and they were invoking good on him. Then he departed, and came back and saw 2 men still sitting there. So he left again. I do not remember whether I informed him or he was informed by somebody else of their departure. Volume 7, Book 62, number 85, narrated by Anas. The Prophet saw the traces of sufra, yellow perfume, on Abdurrahman bin Auf and said, "What is this?" Abdurrahman said, "I have married a woman and have paid gold equal to the weight of a date stone, as her mahr." The Prophet said to him, "May Allah bless you. Offer a wedding banquet even with one sheep." Volume 7, Book 62, number 86, narrated by Aisha. When the Prophet married me, my mother came to me and made me enter the house where I saw some women from the Ansar who said, "May you prosper and have blessings and have good omen." Volume 7, Book 62, number 87, narrated by Abu Hurairah. The Prophet said, "A prophet among the prophets went for a military expedition and said to his people, 'A man who has married a lady and wants to consummate his marriage with her, and he has not done so yet, should not accompany me.'" Volume 7, Book 62, number 88, narrated by Ursa. The Prophet wrote the marriage contract with Aisha while she was 6 years old and consummated his marriage with her while she was 9 years old, and she remained with him for 9 years, that is till his death. Volume 7, Book 62, number 89, narrated by Anas. The Prophet stayed for 3 days at a place between Khaybar and Medina, and there he consummated his marriage with Safiya bint Huyay. I invited the Muslims to a banquet which included neither meat nor bread. The Prophet ordered for the leather dining sheets to be spread, and then dates, dried yogurt and butter were provided over it, and that was the walima, banquet, of the Prophet. The Muslims asked whether Safiya would be considered as his wife, or as a slave girl of what his right hands possessed. Then they said, "If the Prophet screens her from the people, then she is the Prophet's wife, but if he does not screen her, then she is a slave girl." So when the Prophet proceeded, he made a place for her, on the camel, behind him, and screened her from people. Volume 7, Book 62, number 90, narrated by Aisha. When the Prophet married me, my mother came to me and made me enter the house of the Prophet. And nothing surprised me but the coming of Allah's apostle to me in the forenoon. Volume 7, Book 62, number 91. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah. Allah's apostle said, "Did you get anmat?" I said, "O Allah's apostle, from where can we have anmat?" The Prophet said, "Soon you will have them anmat." Volume 7, Book 62, number 92, narrated by Aisha that she prepared a lady for a man from the Ansar as his bride, and the Prophet said, "O Aisha, haven't you got any amusement during the marriage ceremony, as the Ansar like amusement?" Volume 7, Book 62, number 92, narrated by Anas bin Malik. Whenever the Prophet passed by, my mother Sulaim, he used to enter her and greet her. Anas further said, "Once the Prophet was a bridegroom during his marriage with Zainab. Sulaim said to me, 'Let us give a gift to Allah's apostle.' I said to her, 'Do it.' So she prepared haisa, a sweet dish, made from dates, butter and dried yogurt, and she sent it with me to him. I took it to him and he said, 'Put it down,' and ordered me to call some men whom he named, and to invite whomever I would meet. I did what he ordered me to do, and when I returned I found the house crowded with people, and saw the Prophet keeping his hand over the haisa, and saying over it whatever Allah wished him to say. Then he called the men in batches of 10 to eat of it, and he said to them, 'Mention the name of Allah, and each man should eat of the dish the nearest to him.' When all of them had finished their meals, some of them left, and a few remained there talking, over which I felt unhappy. Then the Prophet went out towards the dwelling places of his wives, and I too went out after him, and told him that those people had left. Then he returned, and entered his dwelling place, and let the curtains fall while I was in his dwelling place, and he was reciting the verses, 'O you who believe, Enter not the prophet's house until leave is given you for a meal, and then, not as early as, to what for its preparation. But when you are invited, enter, and when you have taken your meals, disperse without sitting for a talk. Verily such behavior annoys the prophet, and he would be shy of asking you to go, but Allah is not shy of telling you the truth. 33:53. Abu Uthman said, Anas said, I served the Prophet for 10 years. Volume 7, Book 62, number 94, narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet said, if any one of you, when having sexual intercourse with his wife, says, Bismillah, Allahumma janibni shaitan, wa janib ish shaitan ma razaktana, and if it is destined that they should have a child, then Satan will never be able to harm him. Volume 7, Book 62, number 95, narrated by Anas bin Malik. I was 10 years old when Allah's apostle arrived at Medina. My mother and aunts used to urge me to serve the Prophet regularly, and I served him for 10 years. When the Prophet died I was 20 years old and I knew about the order of al-hijab, veiling of ladies, more than any other person when it was revealed. It was revealed for the first time when Allah's apostle had consummated his marriage with Zainab bint Jahsh. When the day dawned, the Prophet was a bridegroom and he invited the people to a banquet, so they came, ate, and then all left except a few who remained with the Prophet for a long time. The Prophet got up and went out, and I too went out with him so that those people might leave too. The Prophet proceeded and so did I till he came to the threshold of Aisha's dwelling place. Then thinking that these people have left by then, he returned and so did I along with him till he entered upon Zainab, and behold, they were still sitting and had not gone. So the Prophet again went away, and I went away along with him. When we reached the threshold of Aisha's dwelling place he thought that they had left, and so he returned, and I too returned along with him and found those people had left. Then the Prophet drew a curtain between me and him, and the verses of al-hijab were revealed. Volume 7, Book 62, number 96, narrated by Anas. When Abdurrahman bin Auf married an Ansari woman, the Prophet asked him, how much mahr did you give her? Abdurrahman said, gold equal to the weight of a date stone. Anas added, when they, that is the Prophet and his companions, arrived at Medina, the emigrants stayed at the Ansar's houses. Abdurrahman bin Auf stayed at Sa'd bin Arabi's house. Sa'd said to Abdurrahman, I will divide and share my property with you and will give one of my 2 wives to you. Abdurrahman said, may Allah bless you your wives and property. I am not in need of that, but kindly show me the way to the market. So, Abdurrahman went to the market and traded there, gaining a profit of some dried yogurt and butter, and married an Ansari woman. The Prophet said to him, give a banquet, even if with 1 sheep. Volume 7, Book 62, number 97, narrated by Anas. The Prophet did not give a better wedding banquet on the occasion of marrying any of his wives than the one he gave on marrying Zainab, and that banquet consisted of 1 sheep. Volume 7, Book 62, number 98, narrated by Anas. Allah's apostle manumitted Safiya and then married her, and her mahr was her manumission, and he gave a wedding banquet with hais, a sort of sweet dish made from butter, cheese, and dates. Volume 7, Book 62, number 99, narrated by Anas. The Prophet consummated his marriage with a woman, Zainab, so he sent me to invite men to the meals. Volume 7, Book 62, number 100, narrated by Thabit. The marriage of Zainab bint Jahsh was mentioned in the presence of Anas, and he said, I did not see the Prophet giving a better banquet on marrying any of his wives than the one he gave on marrying Zainab. He then gave a banquet with 1 sheep. Volume 7, Book 62, number 101, narrated by Safiya bint Shaiba. The Prophet gave a banquet with 2 muds of barley on marrying some of his wives, 1 mud = 1 3/4 kilogram. Volume 7, Book 62, number 102, narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. Allah's apostle said, if any one of you is invites to a wedding banquet, he must go for it, accept the invitation. Volume 7, Book 62, number 103, narrated by Abu Musa. The Prophet said, set the captives free, accept the invitation to a wedding banquet, and visit the patients. Volume 7, Book 62, number 104, narrated by Al-Bara bin Azib. The Prophet ordered us to do 7 things, and forbade us from 7. He ordered us to visit the patients, to follow the funeral procession, to reply to the sneezer, that is, say to him, Yarhamukallah, may Allah bestow His mercy upon you. If he says, Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, to help others to fulfill their oaths, to help the oppressed, to greet whomever one should meet, and to accept the invitation to a wedding banquet. He forbade us to wear golden rings, to use silver utensils, to use myathir, cushions of silk stuffed with cotton and placed under the rider on the saddle, the kasiyah, linen clothes containing silk brought from an Egyptian town, the istibrak, thick silk, and the dibaj, another kind of silk. See Hadith number 539 and 753, Volume 7, Book 62, number 105, narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd. Abu Usaid as-Sa'di invited Allah's apostle to his wedding party, and his wife, who was the bride, served them on that day. Do you know what drink she gave Allah's apostle? She had soaked some dates for him in water overnight, and when he had finished his meal she gave him that drink of soaked dates. Volume 7, Book 62, number 106, narrated by Abu Huraira. The worst food is that of a wedding banquet to which only the rich are invited while the poor are not invited, and he who refuses an invitation to a banquet disobeys Allah and his apostle. Volume 7, Book 62, number 107, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, "If I am invited to a meal of trotters I will accept it, and if I am given a trotter as a present I will accept it." Volume 7, Book 62, number 108, narrated by Nafi. Abdullah bin Umar said, Allah's apostle said, "Accept the marriage invitation if you are invited to it." Ibn Umar used to accept the invitation whether to a wedding banquet or to any other party, even when he was fasting. Volume 7, Book 62, number 109, narrated by Anas bin Malik. Once the Prophet saw some women and children coming from a wedding party. He got up energetically and happily and said, "By Allah, you, that is the Ansar, are the most beloved of all people to me." Volume 7, Book 62, number 110, narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet. I bought a cushion having on it pictures of animals. When Allah's apostle saw it, he stood at the door and did not enter. I noticed the sign of disapproval on his face and said, "O Allah's apostle, I repent to Allah and his apostle. What sin have I committed?" Allah's apostle said, "What is this cushion?" I said, "I have bought it for you so that you may sit on it and recline on it." Allah's apostle said, "The makers of these pictures will be punished on the day of resurrection, and it will be said to them, 'Give life to what you have created,' that is, these pictures." The Prophet added, "The angels of mercy do not enter a house in which there are pictures of animals." Volume 7, Book 62, number 111, narrated by Sahl. When Abu Usaid as-Sa'idi got married, he invited the Prophet and his companions. None prepared the food for them and brought it to them but his wife. She soaked some dates in water in a stone pot overnight, and when the Prophet had finished his food, she provided him with that drink of soaked dates. Volume 7, Book 62, number 112, narrated by Sahl bin Sa'd. Abu Usaid as-Sa'idi invited the Prophet to his wedding party, and his wife served him on that day, and she was the bride. She said, or Sahl said, "Do you know what she soaked for Allah's apostle? She soaked some dates for him in water in a drinking bowl overnight." Volume 7, Book 62, number 113, narrated by Abu Huraira. Allah's apostle said, "The woman is like a rib. If you try to straighten her, she will break. So if you want to get benefit from her, do so while she still has some crookedness." Volume 7, Book 62, number 114, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, "Whoever believes in Allah and the last day should not hurt, trouble his neighbor. And I advise you to take care of the women, for they are created from a rib, and the most crooked portion of the rib is its upper part. If you try to straighten it, it will break, and if you leave it, it will remain crooked. So I urge you to take care of the women." Volume 7, Book 62, number 115, narrated by Ibn Umar. During the lifetime of the Prophet, we used to avoid chatting leisurely and freely with our wives lest some divine inspiration might be revealed concerning us. But when the Prophet had died, we started chatting leisurely and freely with them. Volume 7, Book 62, number 116, narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. The Prophet said, "Every one of you is a guardian, and every one of you is responsible for his wards. A ruler is a guardian and is responsible for his subjects. A man is a guardian of his family and responsible for them. A wife is a guardian of her husband's house and she is responsible for it. A slave is a guardian of his master's property and is responsible for that. Beware, all of you are guardians and are responsible for your wards." Volume 7, Book 62, number 117, narrated by Aisha 11. Women sat at a place and promised and contracted that they would not conceal anything of the news of their husbands. The first one said, "My husband is like the meat of a lean, weak camel which is kept on the top of a mountain, which is neither easy to climb, nor is the meat fat, so that one might put up with the trouble of fetching it." The second one said, "I shall not relate my husband's news, for I fear that I may not be able to finish his story, for if I describe him, I will mention all his defects and bad traits." The third one said, "My husband is a tall man. If I describe him, and he hears of that, he will divorce me, and if I keep quiet, he will neither divorce me nor treat me as a wife." The fourth one said, "My husband is a moderate person like the night of Tihama, which is neither hot nor cold. I am neither afraid of him, nor am I discontented with him." The fifth one said, "My husband when entering the house is a leopard, and when going out is a lion. He does not ask about whatever is in the house." The sixth one said, "If my husband eats, he eats too much, leaving the dishes empty, and if he drinks he leaves nothing, and if he sleeps alone, away from me, covered in garments, and does not stretch his hands here and there so as to know how I fare. Get along." The seventh one said, "My husband is a wrongdoer or weak and foolish. All the defects are present in him. He may injure your head or your body or may do both." The eighth one said, "My husband is soft to touch like a rabbit and smells like a zarnab, a kind of good-smelling grass." The ninth one said, "My husband is a tall, generous man wearing a long strap for carrying his sword. His ashes are abundant, and his house is near to the people who would easily consult him." The 10th one said, "My husband is Malik, and what is Malik? Malik is greater than whatever I say about him. He is beyond and above all praises which can come to my mind. Most of his camels are kept at home, ready to be slaughtered for the guests, and only a few are taken to the pastures. When the camels hear the sound of the lute or the tambourine, they realize that they are going to be slaughtered for the guests." The 11th one said, "My husband is Abu Zar, and what is Abu Zar? That is, what should I say about him? He has given me many ornaments, and my ears are heavily loaded with them, and my arms have become fat, that is, I have become fat, and he has pleased me, and I have become so happy that I feel proud of myself. He found me with my family who were mere owners of sheep and living in poverty, and brought me to a respected family, having horses and camels and threshing and purifying grain. Whatever I say, he does not rebuke or insult me. When I sleep till late in the morning, and when I drink water or milk, I drink my fill. The mother of Abu Zar, and what may one say in praise of the mother of Abu Zar? Her saddlebags were always full of provision, and her house was spacious. As for the son of Abu Zar, what may one say of the son of Abu Zar? His bed is as narrow as an unsheathed sword, and an arm of a kid of 4 months satisfies his hunger. As for the daughter of Abu Zar, she is obedient to her father and to her mother. She has a fat, well-built body, and that arouses the jealousy of her husband's other wife. As for the maid-slave girl of Abu Zar, what may one say of the maid-slave girl of Abu Zar? She does not uncover our secrets but keeps them, and does not waste our provisions, and does not leave the rubbish scattered everywhere in our house." The 11th lady added, "One day it so happened that Abu Zar went out at the time when the milk was being milked from the animals, and he saw a woman who had 2 sons like 2 leopards playing with her 2 breasts. On seeing her, he divorced me and married her. Thereafter I married a noble man who used to ride a fast tireless horse and keep a spear in his hand. He gave me many things and also a pair of every kind of livestock and said, 'Eat of this, O Umzar, and give provision to your relatives.' She added, 'Yet all those things which my second husband gave me could not fill the smallest utensil of Abu Zar's.' Aisha then said, 'Allah's apostle said to me, I am to you as Abu Zar was to his wife Umzar.' Volume 7, Book 62, number 118. Narrated by Ursa Aisha said, "While the Ethiopians were playing with their small spears, Allah's apostle screened me behind him, and I watched that display, and kept on watching till I left on my own." So you may estimate of what age a little girl may listen to amusement. Volume 7, Book 62, number 119, narrated by Ibn Abbas. I had been eager to ask Umar bin al-Khattab about the 2 ladies from among the wives of the Prophet regarding whom Allah said, "If you 2, wives of the Prophet, namely Aisha and Hafsa, turn in repentance to Allah, your hearts are indeed so inclined to oppose what the Prophet likes." 66.4, till Umar performed the Hajj and I too performed the Hajj along with him. On the way, Umar went aside to answer the call of nature, and I also went aside along with him carrying a tumbler full of water, and when Umar had finished answering the call of nature, I poured water over his hands and he performed the ablution. Then I said to him, "O chief of the believers, who were the two ladies from among the wives of the prophet regarding whom Allah said, 'If you two, wives of the prophet, turn in repentance to Allah, your hearts are indeed so inclined to oppose what the prophet likes.'" 66.4. He said, "I am astonished at your question, O Ibn Abbas." They were Aisha and Hafsa. Then Umar went on narrating the hadith and said, "I and an Ansari neighbor of mine from Bani Umayyah bin Zaid, who used to live in Awali al-Madinah, used to visit the Prophet in turn. He used to go one day and I another day. When I went, I would bring him the news of what had happened that day regarding the divine inspiration and other things, and when he went, he used to do the same for me. We, the people of Quraysh, used to have the upper hand over our wives, but when we came to the Ansar we found that their women had the upper hand over their men, so our women also started learning the ways of the Ansari women. I shouted at my wife and she retorted against me, and I disliked that she should answer me back. She said to me, "Why are you so surprised at my answering you back? By Allah, the wives of the Prophet answer him back, and some of them may leave does not speak to him throughout the day till the night." The talk scared me, and I said to her, "Whoever has done so will be ruined." Then I proceeded after dressing myself and entered upon Hafsa and said to her, "Does any one of you keep the Prophet angry till night?" She said, "Yes." I said, "You are a ruined, losing person. Don't you fear that Allah may get angry for the anger of Allah's apostle, and thus you will be ruined? So do not ask more from the Prophet, and do not answer him back, and do not give up talking to him. Ask me whatever you need, and do not be tempted to imitate your neighbor, that is, Aisha, in her manners, for she is more charming than you and more beloved to the Prophet." Umar added, "At that time a talk was circulating among us that the tribe of Ghassan were preparing their horses to invade us. My Ansari companion, on the day of his turn, went to the town, and returned to us at night and knocked at my door violently and asked if I was there. I became horrified and came out to him. He said, 'Today a great thing has happened.' I asked, 'What is it? Have the people of Ghassan come?' He said, 'No, but what has happened is greater and more horrifying than that. Allah's apostle has divorced his wives." Umar added, "The Prophet kept away from his wives," and I said, "Hafsa is a ruined loser." I'd already thought that most probably this divorce would happen in the near future. So I dressed myself and offered the morning prayer with the Prophet, and then the Prophet entered an upper room and stayed there in seclusion. I entered upon Hafsa and saw her weeping. I asked, "What makes you weep? Did I not warn you about that? Did the Prophet divorce you all?" She said, "I do not know. There he is retired alone in the upper room." I came out and sat near the pulpit and saw a group of people sitting around it, and some of them were weeping. I sat with them for a while but could not endure the situation, so I went to the upper room where the Prophet was and said to a black slave of his, "Will you get the permission of the Prophet for Umar to enter?" The slave went in, talked to the Prophet about it, and then returned saying, "I have spoken to the Prophet and mentioned you, but he kept quiet." Then I returned and sat with the group of people sitting near the pulpit. But I could not bear the situation, and once again I said to the slave, "Will you get the permission for Umar?" He went in and returned saying, "I mentioned you to him, but he kept quiet." So I returned again and sat with the group of people sitting near the pulpit, but I could not bear the situation. And so I went to the slave and said, "Will you get the permission for Umar?" He went in and returned to me saying, "I mentioned you to him, but he kept quiet." When I was leaving, behold, the slave called me saying, "The Prophet has given you permission." Then I entered upon Allah's apostle and saw him lying on a bed made of stalks of date palm leaves, and there was no bedding between it and him. The stalks left marks on his side, and he was leaning on a leather pillow stuffed with date palm fires. I greeted him, and while still standing I said, "O Allah's apostle, have you divorced your wives?" He looked at me and said, "No." I said, "Allah Akbar." And then, while still standing, I said, chatting, "Will you heed what I say, O Allah's apostle? We, the people of Quraysh, used to have power over our women, but when we arrived at Medina we found that the men here were overpowered by their women." The Prophet smiled, and then I said to him, "Will you heed what I say, O Allah's apostle?" I entered upon Hafsa and said to her, "Do not be tempted to imitate your companion, Aisha, for she is more charming than you and more beloved to the Prophet." The Prophet smiled for a second time. When I saw him smiling, I sat down. Then I looked around his house, and by Allah, I could not see anything of importance in his house except 3 hides, so I said, "O Allah's apostle, invoke Allah to make your followers rich, for the Persians and the Romans have been made prosperous, and they have been given the pleasures of the world, although they do not worship Allah. Thereupon the prophet sat up as he was reclining, and said, "Are you of such an opinion, O the son of Al-Khattab? These are the people who have received the rewards for their good deeds in this world." I said, "O Allah's apostle, ask Allah to forgive me." Then the prophet kept away from his wives for 29 days because of the story which Hafsa had disclosed to Aisha. The prophet had said, "I will not enter upon them, my wives, for 1 month, because of his anger towards them, when Allah had admonished him." So when 29 days had passed, the prophet first entered upon Aisha. Aisha said to him, "O Allah's apostle, you had sworn that you would not enter upon us for 1 month, but now only 29 days have passed, for I have been counting them one by one." The prophet said, "The present month is of 29 days. Aisha added, "Then Allah revealed the verses of the option, 2. And out of all his wives, he asked me first, and I chose him. Then he gave option to his other wives, and they said what Aisha had said. 1. The prophet had decided to abstain from eating a certain kind of food because of a certain event, so Allah blamed him for doing so. Some of his wives were the cause of him taking that decision, therefore he deserted them for 1 month. See Quran, 66.4. Volume 7, Book 62, number 120, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, "A woman should not fast, optional fasts, except with her husband's permission if he is at home, staying with her." Volume 7, Book 62, number 121, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, "If a man invites his wife to sleep with him and she refuses to come to him, then the angels send their curses on her till morning." Volume 7, Book 62, number 122, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, "If a woman spends the night deserting her husband's bed, does not sleep with him, then the angels send their curses on her till she comes back to her husband." Volume 7, Book 62, number 123, narrated by Abu Huraira. Allah's apostle said, "It is not lawful for a lady to fast, nawafil, without the permission of her husband when he is at home, and she should not allow anyone to enter his house except with his permission. And if she spends of his wealth on charitable purposes without being ordered by him, he will get half of the reward." Volume 7, Book 62, number 124, narrated by Usama. The Prophet said, "I stood at the gate of paradise and saw that the majority of the people who entered it were the poor, while the wealthy were stopped at the gate for the accounts. But the companions of the fire were ordered to be taken to the fire. Then I stood at the gate of the fire and saw that the majority of those who entered it were women." Volume 7, Book 62, number 125, narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas. During the lifetime of Allah's apostle, the sun eclipsed. Allah's apostle offered the prayer of the eclipse, and so did the people along with him. He performed a long qiyam, standing posture, during which Surat al-Baqarah could have been recited. Then he performed a prolonged bowing, then raised his head and stood for a long time, which was slightly less than that of the first qiyam, and recited Quran. Then he performed a prolonged bowing again, but the period was shorter than the period of the first bowing. Then he stood up, and then prostrated. Again he stood up, but this time the period of standing was less than the first standing. Then he performed a prolonged bowing, but of a lesser duration than the first. Then he stood up again for a long time, but for a lesser duration than the first. Then he performed a prolonged bowing, but of lesser duration than the first. And then he again stood up, and then prostrated, and then finished his prayer. By then the sun eclipse had cleared. The Prophet then said, "The sun and the moon are 2 signs among the signs of Allah, and they do not eclipse because of the death or birth of someone, so when you observe the eclipse remember Allah, offer the eclipse prayer." They, the people, said, "O Allah's apostle, we saw you stretching your hand to take something at this place of yours, then we saw you stepping backward." He said, "I saw paradise, or paradise was shown to me, and I stretched my hand to pluck a bunch of grapes, and had I plucked it, you would have eaten of it as long as this world exists. Then I saw the hell fire, and I have never before seen such a horrible sight as that, and I saw that the majority of its dwellers were women." The people asked, "O Allah's apostle, what is the reason for that?" He replied, "Because of their ungratefulness." It was said, "Do they disbelieve in Allah? Are they ungrateful to Allah?" He replied, "They are not thankful to their husbands and are ungrateful for the favors done to them. Even if you do good to one of them all your life, when she sees some harshness from you, she will say, 'I have never seen any good from you.'" Volume 7, Book 62, number 126, narrated by Imran. The Prophet said, "I looked at paradise and saw that the majority of its residents were the poor, and I looked at the hell fire and saw that the majority of its residents were women. Volume 7, Book 62, number 127, narrated by Abdullah bin Amr bin Al as Allah's apostle said, "O Abdullah, have I not been informed that you fast all the day and stand in prayer all night?" I said, "Yes, O Allah's apostle." He said, "Do not do that. Observe the fast sometimes and also leave them the fast at other times. Stand up for the prayer at night and also sleep at night. Your body has a right over you, your eyes have a right over you, and your wife has a right over you." Volume 7, Book 62, number 128, narrated by Ibn Umar. The Prophet said, "All of you are guardians and are responsible for your wards. The ruler is a guardian and the man is a guardian of his family, the lady is a guardian and is responsible for her husband's house and his offspring, and so all of you are guardians and are responsible for your wards." Volume 7, Book 62, number 129, narrated by Anas, Allah's apostle, took an oath that he would not visit his wives for 1 month, and he sat in an upper room belonging to him. Then, on the 29th day he came down. It was said, "O Allah's apostle, you had taken an oath not to visit your wives for 1 month." He said, "The present month is of 29 days. Volume 7, Book 62, number 130, narrated by Salama. The Prophet took an oath that he would not enter upon some of his wives for 1 month. But when 29 days had elapsed, he went to them in the morning or evening. It was said to him, "O Allah's Prophet, you had taken an oath that you would not enter upon them for 1 month. He replied, "The month can be of 29 days. Volume 7, Book 62, number 131, narrated by Ibn Abbas. One morning we saw the wives of the Prophet weeping, and every one of them had her family with her. I went to the mosque and found that it was crowded with people. Then Umar bin al-Khattab came and went up to the Prophet, who was in his upper room. He greeted him, but nobody answered. He greeted again, but nobody answered. Then the gatekeeper called him, and he entered upon the Prophet, and asked, "Have you divorced your wives?" The Prophet said, "No, but I have taken an oath not to go to them for 1 month. So the Prophet stayed away from his wives for 29 days and then entered upon them. Volume 7, Book 62, number 132, narrated by Abdullah bin Zama. The Prophet said, "None of you should flog his wife as he flogs a slave and then have sexual intercourse with her in the last part of the day." Volume 7, Book 62, number 133, narrated by Aisha. An Ansari woman gave her daughter in marriage and the hair of the latter started falling out. The Ansari women came to the Prophet and mentioned that to him and said, "My daughter's husband, suggested that I should let her wear false hair." The Prophet said, "No, don't do that, for Allah sends his curses upon such ladies who lengthen their hair artificially." Volume 7, Book 62, number 134, narrated by Aisha. Regarding the verse, "If a wife fears cruelty or desertion on her husband's part," 4.128, it concerns the woman whose husband does not want to keep her with him any longer but wants to divorce her and marry some other lady, so she says to him, "Keep me and do not divorce me, and then marry another woman, and you may neither spend on me nor sleep with me." This is indicated by the statement of Allah, "There is no blame on them if they arrange an amicable settlement between them both, and such settlement is better." 4.128, Volume 7, Book 62, number 135, narrated by Jabir. We used to practice coitus interruptus during the lifetime of Allah's Apostle. Volume 7, Book 62, number 136, narrated by Jabir. We used to practice coitus interruptus while the Quran was being revealed. Jabir added, "We used to practice coitus interruptus during the lifetime of Allah's Apostle while the Quran was being revealed." Volume 7, Book 62, number 137, narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. We got female captives in the war booty, and we used to do coitus interruptus with them. So we asked Allah's Apostle about it, and he said, "Do you really do that?" Repeating the question thrice, "There is no soul that is destined to exist but will come into existence till the day of resurrection." Volume 7, Book 62, number 138, narrated by Al-Qasim. Aisha said that whenever the Prophet intended to go on a journey, he drew lots among his wives, so as to take one of them along with him. During one of his journeys the lot fell on Aisha and Hafsa. When night fell the Prophet would ride beside Aisha and talk with her. One night Hafsa said to Aisha, "Won't you ride my camel tonight and I ride yours, so that you may see me, and I see you, in new situation?" Aisha said, "Yes, I agree." So Aisha rode, and then the Prophet came towards Aisha's camel on which Hafsa was riding. He greeted Hafsa and then proceeded, beside her, till they dismounted, on the way. Aisha missed him, and so, when they dismounted, she put her legs in the idkir and said, O Lord, Allah, send a scorpion or a snake to bite me, for I am not to blame him, the Prophet. Volume 7, Book 62, number 139, narrated by Aisha Sada bint Zam'a gave up her turn to me, Aisha, and so the Prophet used to give me, Aisha, both my day and the day of Sada. Volume 7, Book 62, number 140, narrated by Anas. The tradition of the Prophet is that if someone marries a virgin and he has already a matron wife with him, then he should stay with the virgin for 7 days, and if someone marries a matron and he has already a virgin wife with him, then he should stay with her for 3 days. Volume 7, Book 62, number 141, narrated by Anas. It is the Prophet's tradition that if someone marries a virgin and he has already a matron wife, then he should stay for 7 days with her, the virgin, and then by turns. And if someone marries a matron and he has already a virgin wife, then he should stay with her, the matron, for 3 days and then by turns. Volume 7, Book 62, number 142, narrated by Anas bin Malik. The Prophet used to pass by, have sexual relation with all his wives in one night, and at that time he had 9 wives. Volume 7, Book 62, number 143, narrated by Aisha. Whenever Allah's apostle finished his Asr prayer, he would enter upon his wives and stay with one of them. One day he went to Hafsa and stayed with her longer than usual. Volume 7, Book 62, number 144, narrated by Aisha, that during his fatal ailment, Allah's apostle used to ask his wives, "Where shall I stay tomorrow? Where shall I stay tomorrow?" He was looking forward to Aisha's turn, so all his wives allowed him to stay where he wished, and he stayed at Aisha's house till he died there. Aisha added, "He died on the day of my usual turn at my house. Allah took him unto him while his head was between my chest and my neck, and his saliva was mixed with my saliva." Volume 7, Book 62, number 145, narrated by Ibn Abbas. That Umar entered upon Hafsa and said, "O my daughter, do not be misled by the manners of her who is proud of her beauty because of the love of Allah's apostle for her." By her he meant Aisha. Umar added, "Then I told that to Allah's apostle and he smiled on hearing that." Volume 7, Book 62, number 146, narrated by Asma. Some lady said, "O Allah's apostle, my husband has another wife, so it is sinful of me to claim that he has given me what he has not given me, in order to tease her." Allah's apostle said, "The one who pretends that he has been given what he has not been given, is just like the false one who wears 2 garments of falsehood." Volume 7, Book 62, number 147, narrated by Abdullah bin Masud. The Prophet said, "There is none having a greater sense of gira than Allah, and for that he has forbidden the doing of evil actions, illegal sexual intercourse, etc. There is none who likes to be praised more than Allah does." Volume 7, Book 62, number 148. Narrated by Aisha. Allah's apostle said, "O followers of Muhammad, there is none who has a greater sense of gira, self-respect, than Allah, so he has forbidden that his slave commits illegal sexual intercourse, or his slave girl commits illegal sexual intercourse. O followers of Muhammad, if you but knew what I know, you would laugh less and weep more." Volume 7, Book 62, number 149, narrated by Asma. I heard Allah's apostle saying, "There is none having a greater sense of gira, self-respect, than Allah," and narrated Abu Huraira that he heard the Prophet saying the same. Volume 7, Book 62, number 150, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, "Allah has a sense of gira, and Allah's sense of gira is provoked when a believer does something which Allah has prohibited." Volume 7, Book 62, number 151, narrated by Asma bint Abu Bakr. When Az-Zubair married me, he had no real property or any slave or anything else except a camel which drew water from the well, and his horse. I used to feed his horse with fodder and drew water and sew the bucket for drawing it, and prepare the dough, but I did not know how to bake bread, so our Ansari neighbors used to bake bread for me, and they were honorable ladies. I used to carry the date stones on my head from Zubair's land given to him by Allah's apostle, and this land was 2/3 farsakh, about 2 miles, from my house. One day, while I was coming with the date stones on my head, I met Allah's apostle along with some Ansari people. He called me and then, directing his camel to kneel down, said, "Ikh, Ikah," so as to make me ride behind him on his camel. I felt shy to travel with the men and remembered Az-Zubair and his sense of gira, as he was one of those people who had the greatest sense of gira. Allah's apostle noticed that I felt shy, so he proceeded. I came to Az-Zubair and said, I met Allah's apostle while I was carrying a load of date stones on my head, and he had some companions with him. He made his camel kneel down so that I might ride, but I felt shy in his presence and remembered your sense of gira. See the glossary. On that, Az-Zubair said, By Allah, your carrying the date stones, and you being seen by the Prophet in such a state, is more shameful to me than your riding with him. I continued serving in this way, till Abu Bakr sent me a servant to look after the horse, whereupon I felt as if he had set me free. Volume 7, Book 62, number 152, narrated by Anas. While the Prophet was in the house of one of his wives, one of the mothers of the believers sent a meal in a dish. The wife at whose house the Prophet was, struck the hand of the servant, causing the dish to fall and break. The Prophet gathered the broken pieces of the dish, and then started collecting on them the food which had been in the dish and said, Your mother, my wife, felt jealous. Then he detained the servant till a sound dish was brought from the wife at whose house he was. He gave the sound dish to the wife whose dish had been broken and kept the broken one at the house where it had been broken. Volume 7, Book 62, number 153, narrated by Jabir. The Prophet said, I entered paradise and saw a palace and asked, Whose palace is this? They, the angels, said, This palace belongs to Umar bin al-Khattab. I intended to enter it, and nothing stopped me except my knowledge about your sense of gira, self-respect, O Umar. Umar said, O Allah's apostle, let my father and mother be sacrificed for you. O Allah's prophet, how dare I think of my gira, self-respect, being offended by you. Volume 7, Book 62, number 154, narrated by Abu Huraira. While we were sitting with Allah's apostle, Allah's apostle said, While I was sleeping I saw a woman performing ablution beside a palace. I asked, Whose palace is this? It was said, This palace belongs to Umar. Then I remembered his sense of gira and returned. On that Umar started weeping in that gathering and said, O Allah's apostle, how dare I think of my self-respect being offended by you. Volume 7, Book 62, number 155, narrated by Aisha. That Allah's apostle said to her, You are pleased with me or angry with me? I said, Whence do you know that? He said, When you are pleased with me you say, No, by the Lord of Muhammad. But when you are angry with me, then you say, No, by the Lord of Abraham. Thereupon I said, Yes, you are right, but by Allah, O Allah's apostle, I leave nothing but your name. Volume 7, Book 62, number 156, narrated by Aisha. I never felt so jealous of any wife of Allah's apostle as I did of Khadijah, because Allah's apostle used to remember and praise her too often, and because it was revealed to Allah's apostle that he should give her, Khadijah, the glad tidings of her having a palace of Kasab in paradise. Volume 7, Book 62, number 157, narrated by Al-Miswar bin Makrama. I heard Allah's apostle who was on the pulpit saying, Banu Hisham bin al-Mughira have requested me to allow them to marry their daughter to Ali bin Abu Talib, but I don't give permission and will not give permission unless Ali bin Abi Talib divorces my daughter in order to marry their daughter, because Fatima is a part of my body, and I hate what she hates to see, and what hurts her, hurts me. Volume 7, Book 62, number 158, narrated by Anas. I will narrate to you a hadith I heard from Allah's apostle, and none other than I will tell you of it. I heard Allah's apostle saying, From among the portents of the hour are the following: religious knowledge will be taken away, general ignorance in religious matters will increase, illegal sexual intercourse will prevail, drinking of alcoholic drinks will prevail, men will decrease in number, and women will increase in number, so much so that 50 women will be looked after by one man. Volume 7, Book 62, number 159, narrated by Uqba bin Amir. Allah's apostle said, Beware of entering upon the ladies. A man from the Ansar said, Allah's apostle, what about Al-Hamu, the in-laws of the wife, the brothers of her husband or his nephews, etc.? The Prophet replied, The in-laws of the wife are death itself. Volume 7, Book 62, number 160, narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet said, No man should stay with a lady in seclusion except in the presence of a due muhram. A man stood up and said, O Allah's apostle, my wife has gone out intending to perform the Hajj, and I have been enrolled in the army for such and such campaign. The Prophet said, Return and perform the Hajj with your wife. Volume 7, Book 62, number 161, narrated by Anas bin Malik. An Ansari woman came to the Prophet and he took her aside and said to her, "By Allah, you Ansar are the most beloved people to me." Volume 7, Book 62, number 162, narrated by Salama. That while the Prophet was with her there was an effeminate man in the house. The effeminate man said to Salama's brother Abdullah bin Abi Umayyah, "If Allah should make you conquer Taif tomorrow, I recommend that you take the daughter of Gailan in marriage, for she is so fat that she shows 4 folds of flesh when facing you and 8 when she turns her back." Thereupon the Prophet said to us, "This effeminate man should not enter upon you any more." Volume 7, Book 62, number 163, narrated by Aisha. The Prophet was screening me with his rida, garment covering the upper part of the body, while I was looking at the Ethiopians who were playing in the courtyard of the mosque. I continued watching, till I was satisfied. So you may deduce from this event how a little girl, who has not reached the age of puberty, who is eager to enjoy amusement, should be treated in this respect. Volume 7, Book 62, number 164, narrated by Aisha. Once Sada bint Zama went out at night for some need, and Umar saw her, and recognizing her he said to her, "By Allah, O Sada, you cannot hide yourself from us." So she returned to the Prophet and mentioned that to him while he was sitting in my dwelling taking his supper and holding a bone covered with meat in his hand. Then the divine inspiration was revealed to him, and when that state was over the Prophet was saying, "O women, you have been allowed by Allah to go out for your needs." Volume 7, Book 62, number 165, narrated by Salim's father. The Prophet said, "If the wife of any one of you asks permission to go to the mosque, he should not forbid her." Volume 7, Book 62, number 166, narrated by Aisha. My foster uncle came and asked permission to enter, but I refused to admit him till I asked Allah's apostle about that. He said, "He is your uncle, so allow him to come in." I said, "O Allah's apostle, I have been suckled by a woman and not by a man." Allah's apostle said, "He is your uncle, so let him enter upon you." And that happened after the order of al-hijab, compulsory veiling, was revealed. All things which become unlawful because of blood relations are unlawful because of the corresponding foster-suckling relations. Volume 7, Book 62, number 167, narrated by Abdullah bin Masud. The Prophet said, "A woman should not look at or touch another woman to describe her to her husband in such a way as if he was actually looking at her." Volume 7, Book 62, number 168, narrated by Abdullah. The Prophet said, "A woman should not look at or touch another woman to describe her to her husband in such a way as if he was actually looking at her." Volume 7, Book 62, number 169, narrated by Abu Hurairah, the Prophet, Solomon's son of the Prophet. David said, "Tonight I will go round, that is have sexual relations with, 100 women, my wives, every one of whom will deliver a male child who will fight in Allah's cause." On that an angel said to him, "Say, if Allah will." But Solomon did not say it and forgot to say it. Then he had sexual relations with them, but none of them delivered any child except one who delivered a half-person. The Prophet said, "If Solomon had said, 'If Allah will,' Allah would have fulfilled his above desire, and that saying would have made him more hopeful." Volume 7, Book 62, number 170, narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah. The Prophet disliked that one should go to one's family at night, on returning from a journey. Volume 7, Book 62, number 171, narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah. Allah's apostle said, "When any one of you is away from his house for a long time, he should not return to his family at night." Volume 7, Book 62, number 172, narrated by Jabir. I was with Allah's apostle in a ghazwa, and when we returned I wanted to hurry while riding a slow camel. A rider came behind me. I looked back and saw that the rider was Allah's apostle. He said to me, "What makes you in such a hurry?" I replied, "I am newly married." He said, "Did you marry a virgin or a matron?" I replied, "Not a virgin, but a matron." He said, "Why didn't you marry a young girl with whom you could play and who could play with you?" Then when we approached Medina and were going to enter it, the Prophet said, "Wait till you enter your homes at night, in the first part of the night, so that the ladies with unkempt hair may comb their hair, and those whose husbands have been absent for a long time may shave their pubic hair." The sub-narrator, Hashim, said, "A reliable narrator told me that the Prophet added in this hadith, 'Seek to beget children, children, O Jabir.'" Volume 7, Book 62, number 173, narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah. The prophet said, "If you enter your town at night after coming from a journey, do not enter upon your family till the woman whose husband was absent from the house shaves her pubic hair, and the woman with unkempt hair combs her hair." Allah's apostle further said, "O Jabir, seek to have offspring, seek to have offspring." Volume 7, Book 62, number 174, narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah. We were with the Prophet in Ghazwa, and when we returned and approached Medina, I wanted to hurry while riding a slow camel. A rider overtook me and pricked my camel with a spear which he had, whereupon my camel started running as fast as any other fast camel you may see. I looked back and behold, the rider was Allah's apostle. I said, "O Allah's apostle, I am newly married." He asked, "Have you got married?" I replied, "Yes." He said, "A virgin or a matron?" I replied, "Not a virgin, but a matron." He said, "Why didn't you marry a young girl so that you could play with her and she with you?" When we reached near Medina and were going to enter it, the Prophet said, "Wait till you enter your home early in the night, so that the lady whose hair is unkempt may comb her hair, and that the lady whose husband has been away may shave her pubic hair." Volume 7, Book 62, number 175. Narrated by Abu Hazim. The people differed about the type of treatment which had been given to Allah's apostle on the day of the battle of Uhud. So they asked Sahl bin Sa'd as-Sa'id, who was the only surviving companion of the Prophet at Medina. He replied, "Nobody is left at Medina who knows it better than I. Fatima was washing the blood off his face, and Ali was bringing water in his shield, and then a mat of date palm leaves was burnt and the ash was inserted into the wound." Volume 7, Book 62, number 176, narrated by Abdur Rahman bin Abbas. I heard Ibn Abbas answering a man who asked him, "Did you attend the prayer of Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr with Allah's apostle?" Ibn Abbas replied, "Yes, and had it not been for my close relationship with him, I could not have offered it." That was because of his young age. Ibn Abbas further said, Allah's apostle went out and offered the Eid prayer and then delivered the sermon. Ibn Abbas did not mention anything about the Adhan, the call for prayer, or the Iqama. He added, "Then the Prophet went to the women and instructed them and gave them religious advice and ordered them to give alms, and I saw them reaching out their hands to their ears and necks to take off the earrings and necklaces, etc., and throwing it towards Bilal. Then the Prophet returned with Bilal to his house." Volume 7, Book 62, number 177. Narrated by Aisha Abu Bakr admonished me and poked me with his hands in the flank, and nothing stopped me from moving at that time, except the position of Allah's apostle whose head was on my thigh.